If you have highly engaged folks who are not stressed, who are not spending their time looking for tools and access, you are going to get more of their creative energy. AI can't know. It can't sense, it can't perceive. And those are still very much available to us as humans. Many folks would have this opinion or have said AI is a tool. And I think that is true. We focus far too much on happy path and forget.
My name is Jochem van der Veer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called TheyDo, the journey management platform for business decision-making. We raised over $50 million and are growing globally. Our enterprise customers include Ford, J&J, the Home Depot, and Pfizer. I mean, wherever you look, understanding customers is key to staying ahead. But in order to do this at scale, aligning so many different teams with the customer journey is incredibly hard, but it is possible. I really wish this podcast existed before we started our company because so many companies are organizing around journeys and there's so much to learn. So in order to share what I'm learning, what I'm hearing with our community, I meet with industry experts. And in my video podcast, I'm here to explore the world of business strategy, design, and journeys, customer journeys, to really get an understanding of how leaders are changing their way in their business. So let's dive into the show. My guest today, Jennifer Jenkins, from shaping experience at Fortune 500 companies to collaborating with top global consultancies. Today, she is the head of CX design at Scotiabank. Specializing in service and systemic thinking, she takes a life-centered approach. And we're digging into making sense of chaos, distilling intricate systems into elegant, impactful designs. And of course, her take on journey management. Jennifer, I'm so glad you could make it today.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
So let's start with the spicy topic. Everyone talks about breaking the silos. My take on it is like silos are very useful for some things, but not for all things. So breaking the silos, uniting the silos, I mean, is that even the right goal to have?
I love this question. I would agree with you. I think silos are a form of order, right? Otherwise we have chaos. So we need these kind of subroutines and these, shortcuts, if you will, that help us get things done. That are certainly the more repeatable things. So I think in our organizations, when we have these silos, if you will, it's just a reframe of it. It helps us get work done. But I like your thinking about connecting them or uniting them, or I guess I would think of it more as connecting them. Where are the great connection points where info and work and processes can flow at the right juncture?
Why is it always that silos are this pesky topic when we talk about customer experience? Why do we not see that come up in different parts of the organization more?
When I think of service design, the Achilles heel of service design is org design for this very reason. Because you have folks doing a job, working and delivering their part of their segment, their part of the experience, and then you either get gaps or you get overlap. More often than not, it's gaps. And I think that's if your org is not aligned to the service you want to deliver, you're going to have pain points. And I think we see this more in large, older, complex orgs than you do in younger startups, because right out of the gate, they have an experience they want to deliver and they create their org they need to deliver it. And it's over time, these things, evolve.
Are the silos ever going to go away? I mean, building an early stage company, growing, being experience centric, being customer centric is like the norm. And then these companies grow over time. Do you think like we'll see the later cohorts of companies that have been, created in the last 5 or 10 years that will grow into become an enterprise business and not face these problems? Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying like, no, they will have the same gaps because they will add their services and products and they will increase their basic footprint on what they and how they serve their customers? So it's inevitable. Like, what's your take on that?
I don't think they're going away. I think you need the bigger and larger your organization gets, the more structure you need to hold it up. And I think that happens whether it's, honeycombs and honey cells, right? Like they are small structures that in aggregate hold something together. And so I think that I think it is necessary. I think it's reflected in the world. It's kind of part of the natural order. Do I think there are ways we can better communicate and better transmit information? Yes. Is that happening with technology at a faster rate? Yes. So I think it's not going to look exactly the same, but you're going to hear me say a lot about just reframing, and I think it's just reframing. Is it silo or is it structure? Is information flowing? Is it stuck? These kinds of questions I think that we want to ask versus your original question, which is let's bust this all up and just create chaos.
Right. So let's not do that. Let's not create chaos. Let's try to work with it. So you mentioned like service is actually connecting or uniting the silos in a way, because multiple silos or multiple structures of organization are necessary to deliver the service. Is that the way that you think about uniting or connecting the dots across them? Is it like taking the service angle, or is there a different way that you think about like what works to connect them?
That's the way I think about it. Yeah, you're right. I think about what kind of experience we want to create, and then what needs to be true to make that happen, whether that's how is this org structured? How are we delivering this? What systems and technology do we need? And some of those may be legacy. Org structure can be legacy. Technology can be legacy. And that's where you start to get pain points in your experience. And so those things over time drive the experience versus this is the experience we want to create. And then let's make a system or affect a system to do that. So I think that's how I would think about it is if you're having your technology driving the experience or your org structure or your delivery, whether that's existing websites or personnel, it's gonna have a gap or crack at some point.
So you work at a bank, right?
I do. Our bank is old, maybe not as old as some places in the world, but for Canada, it predates our confederation. So it's an old organization.
Right. I had Alison Landers from UBS on the podcast recently. She's the Chief Customer Experience Officer. And she had an unusual take on setting this up. But before we go into this, I want to just say that she said you can't just rename all your product managers to journey managers and call it a day, right? I mean, in service design, we all work with customer journeys and blueprints. And we've seen many organizations go from, hey, look, we have a lot of product owners or we have a lot of product managers. Let's just give them a journey view or a journey responsibility. They cut across the business and there with every problem is solved. So her take was, you just can't do that. How is that at Scotiabank? Is that a problem that you've tried to tackle in the same way? Is that something you've seen? How are you experiencing that from your perspective?
Well, what I did when I thought about addressing silos, if you will, or this kind of mismatch of the experience framed as product versus a connected service. What I did was think about our product teams and our product journeys as our customers. And I realized that we were exposing a lot of our underwear, if you will, to our internal clients and making it difficult for them to access the insights and what we know about our clients and our customers to them. So we thought more about what the model would be to connect so our product teams didn't have an enormous threshold to overcome to get what we know about our customers into the products. So we organized cross-functional teams into what we call pods, and we're looking at the problem it's a much more cross-functional way versus I need a UXR over here, or I need a service designer over here, or, foresight practitioner. We took the problem in from the product team, and then we kind of swarmed around it and solved it that way. It's been
What
working.
what is the best structure for journey pods? This came up a couple of times. So how are you thinking about designing the pods? Who should be in it? What kind of roles? Is that different from product to product? I mean, when you think about simple banking and account creation, from mortgages, from opening loans, from savings, from starting to think about retirement, like, how do you think about setting up pods? How does that work in your mind?
Well, a few things. We did streamline the intake so that we weren't having a many-to-many model. We put the questions, to call it intake, through our group managers. And so that's that helped. It helped actually immensely in some ways, and then it created a new problem in others. Sometimes, that's, I think, to your point about, where there can be silos in an org, that can happen there, right? That's where information flow might get cut off. But otherwise, rather than having a many-to-many, we did streamline that. But we have very small pods, so they're not, it's manageable. It's something that can be corrected pretty easily. As far as who's in the pod, we're looking at these pods, I would say, are more a CX strategy pod. So they're more at the upfront. So they have folks who know about design strategy and can ask the tough questions of our product teams and our design teams before they're even designing, about who are you designing for? What's the value prop for our customer? These kinds of questions. So we know that we're scoping it and going to be closer to the mark that way. Then we have teams of researchers, and our research is broad. We do both quantitative and qualitative, everything from ethnographies and borrowing from logical methods. And so we have very qualitative aspects to our design research, but then we are also doing a lot more quant through tools, online tools for unmoderated testing, usability testing, and using analytics. And so I love using quant and qual together. I like the quant to both identify and size the issue. How big, how many people are having this problem? Where is it in our experience? And then the qual of how to solve it, how to design for it. Why are people dropping off here? Why are people not completing their applications? What have you?
When you work with your product teams, like, what happens a lot is that you're doing a ton of research, you have a lot of data, you're going through it, you produce wonderful insights, and then the teams say, okay, sure, thank you for the opportunity. We have other things to do. We'll look into it later. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you make sure that the whole organization is moving into the same direction and focusing on the right things?
Mm-hmm. Our relationships have really grown. I think we've created these small iteration cycles within. So as I was mentioning, that testing we do a lot more frequently, a lot more often, to make it more iterative. And so there's more of a feedback loop happening within those teams, between those teams. The other thing that we've done is one pod is across many product teams. And so, yet within a domain of of work to be done, let's say, you know. When I say that, I mean, like you were saying about mortgages or about, whatever that, maybe it's logging on, these kinds of things. Um, so the teams gain a bit of depth of knowledge of our customer in that domain or that topic area. And so because of that, they're looking for the CX breaks. But as far as um, making sure we're all kind of on the same path, we're all moving together, I think the fact that these pods do touch many journeys, there's a lot of transmission of what's going on. We can also scale some of our research, to your point. It's like, oh, we found this out here. It also applies here and here. Um, and I think that, also having a good, clear vision and a well articulated vision. But I think when it gets down to those details, um, I think as we it's always this like cross, like deep and wide, and keep moving in those two directions frequently in a cycle.
So I want to talk about journey management, but maybe before we go into it, like what's your take on using journeys, customer journeys in general? Should they be like created to get initial understanding? Is it more like an ongoing way of working through different parts of the business, solving for the customer and the business? Like, what's your take on customer journeys at large, and how should we be thinking about them in the context of, let's say, large enterprise bank?
Mm-hmm. Do I think otherwise you get a list of initiatives or a list of features that maybe don't make sense. And I think it helps prioritize what features will improve the journey or shorten the journey or will create appropriate friction within a journey. So I do think that approach, because it is coming from the customer viewpoint. Um, I What else do I think about them? I think they're useful. However, going to org structure, I think you have different structures in technology. Like the journey can cut across some of these other org structures to create that mesh. I think what else would I say about journeys? This is what I would also say, and I haven't maybe cracked this nut yet, but journeys often get explained or designed in a very linear way. And truthfully, they're very nonlinear. And I would love to think about tools, and I think our teams do this, but in tools that are a bit more that can describe a journey in a more nonlinear way. And I think like it feels actually a little reductive sometimes how we put our journeys on paper or how we describe them in a
What would
linear
be an
way.
example of that, right? Just to make it tangible, like
Well,
for
I guess I'm
any
thinking of
customer
journey
experience.
maps quite tangibly, or even our blueprints, in service design, if I'm thinking tactically about those kinds of examples. And I think we just end up on the happy path. We focus far too much on the happy path and forget unhappy paths and forget to close off those loops. And or it can be a threat. There are these pressures, time, and like all project management, pressures of time and money and budget. But I think this idea of really going to end, making sure your experience doesn't have dead ends, is tied up, and where can your one journey, let's say it's applying for a new credit card, where can that end in maybe something that's more appropriate for that customer? Maybe they end up in a line of credit or some other product that would actually make more sense for them. I think back to your silo comment, they tend to be quite contained. They can be.
If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave a review. It makes all the difference. The Experience Edge podcast is where I interview business leaders, CX pioneers, and the best designers who share their insight on creating business impact, having an edge on the customer experience. Do you want more exclusive content and behind-the-scenes access? Check out the Experience Edge podcast on YouTube and LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing. Now let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah, I can see the point, and it's a good thing and a bad thing, right? You want to like give a specific context, like where does it start and when did the customer achieve something that they perceive as to be valuable or something to complete. So that's a good way to think about it. But I definitely see your point. I'm like, hey, you need to like also include the sad path and where people are abandoning or are not even able to progress. Those are just the same journeys with a different context, with a different ending, and just as important to bring all together. Have you seen an org design around journeys work, or is it always a hybrid where we have the silos, where we have the journey pods, and that's the best way to do it? You mentioned technology, processes, then we have the people side of things. Does a journey-centric org model work?
No, I think exclusively no, for all the reasons I just mentioned, that it will become far too linear and kind of myopic, right? So I think having these crisscrossing structures and connections will helps avoid some of that for sure. Will it fix it? I don't know, but I think it will avoid. I think you can avoid some and maybe make a good connection at some point. I don't think. There's also the point that it might be perfect for the time. So if you are a brand new startup and you are doing an MVP, a minimal viable product, and you are going to get to market as soon as possible, yes, everyone on the same ship rowing in the same direction, let's get this out. I guess I'm thinking in terms of an older, large organization, complex org. There's a lot more to consider. And the communication, amongst that is key.
One of the things in a larger org that's often overlooked as well when we talk about customer experience is the other part of the equation, which is like the employee experience underpinning that. Mm-hmm. So many companies focus on CX, but they neglect employee experience. Why do you think that happens?
Yeah. So before I got into digital, I actually worked in workplace design, workplace strategy. And so this was the major value prop that we brought was that helping your employees, there's a few thoughts on this, helping your employees do their best work is ultimately better for the company, better for your bottom line. Whether that's creating spaces where they can interact, can run into each other, can quickly confer on important points. I think, so there, I kind of come from this bias of already believing that this is important. So I think there is this idea of investing in your people and their best work will get your clients their best work. And there's actually, there's a good study on how there's a correlation between trust in the company and the consumer trust in that company. And so if your employees have a high level of trust in the company, that gets transmuted, transferred to the clients. They feel it or understand it, or what gets communicated in the service provided. So there are lots of reasons to, other than obvious, healthy workplace kind of situations. I think employee experience, it can be a differentiator for sure. I think if you have highly engaged folks who are not stressed, who are not spending their time looking for tools and access, you are going to get more of their creative energy, right? Your brain works that way. I can't say I'm a neuroscientist, but the stuff I've read says a stressed person isn't as creative. And so I think if you can reduce those barriers, you're going to have a much more creative, a team that's going to be not only creative, but like observant and able to solve problems.
I hear leadership in many of the large companies think like, yeah, sure, that makes sense. But how are we going to measure that? How are we going to make sure that like we're going to invest in this and it actually works? Like this is such a hard thing. Like how should we think about quantifying this and actually showing that this works other than gut feel reaction is like, yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's, I think that is a tough one. You're going to get your perception data. You can make those correlations, potential connections, but it's a great question. And when I think about the one thing I would do better for CX, it would be to have better metrics of these intangibles, whether that's customer experience, their client experience, or our employee experience. Better metrics are a translation tool with business to say this does matter. I can't quantify it, but it's such a qualitative, the nature of it is so qualitative. It's hard to...
Do you think like the metrics, there are specific KPIs, it's just like data collection is not done and therefore it's hard to understand, or we don't actually know how to measure it? My wish is to actually like deep think about what to measure and how to quantify it. What is it that you're saying?
I think it's probably, well, when I think of how we've approached it, it's more, it's a triangulation. It's like it's indexing it. It's like these several measures line up to indicate this, and I think maybe it's, to what degree are you measuring this? Like, do you want statistical significance, or do you want an indicator that's showing you we're going in the right direction? So I think like pure measures are hard and maybe don't exist. Well, maybe they don't, from what I know. Pure ones don't exist. I think we have lots of proxies, and I think we can do some indexing that can get us closer to understanding. And I think it's also a matter of layers. So we have these multiple of metrics. When these 3 out of 5 are scaling bad, what do we do? Do we know what to do? Versus they're all 5 are clear, or I think there's some diagnostics there. I think that's where maybe the quant can lead you to more qual. Be like, okay, we know something's here, but we're not sure what. Let's dig in and use the qualitative methods.
So switching gears to qualitative metrics methods. When I was doing research for this call, I saw somewhere you mentioned that COVID shifted research to virtual methods. Yes, sure. But some things got lost in translation, and you're a big proponent, it seems, of bringing back in-person research. Is that true? Like, let's fact that, check that first. And if so, why is that so important?
I love in-situ research, like contextual research, for a lot of reasons. I think a lot of information can be shared here in this format that you and I have right now. You're across the world, and we're having a great conversation. However, you don't know what color my pants are right now. Like, there's just information that doesn't exist in this format. There's, what context am I? Are you aware that it's raining outside right now? These kinds of things. It just broadens the context of those behaviors. So when I think back to when I worked in workplace, we did a lot of observational ethnography. And so we would watch how people moved through the space, interacted in the space, what tools they used in the space, and things like, does it rain a lot here? If I'm using this example, it's raining today. Do people have a place for their umbrellas? How are we going to design for their wet footwear? These kinds of things. If we're doing a spatial context, I think that can be applied to digital, and it can be applied really to any design method, or medium. But there's just so much information that is not transmitted through our digital means. Does this person smell? What do they smell like? Are there other smells in the room or in the space? What I'm interested in the digital to do in situ research is more of how people are using their devices, right? When we're thinking about accessibility or barrier-free design, how are people using either their assistive technology or the technology they have? You learn so much about their workarounds, how they manage through a world that's not designed with them in mind. I think you understand more why those problems are happening, that your data might be picking up in your analytics. I think it just makes there's so much more context from which to understand the problem, especially when you're going into design, either to a new problem or a new need that you're meeting, or fixing an old one.
So the other side of the equation is also true. Now with AI, we are bringing synthetic researchers to market. Not saying that we are doing that, but there are those around already, and they never get tired. They're always there to interview people. They're always ready to rock. So it's almost inevitable that these AI research solutions are becoming the norm.
Right.
And we're getting more of that. So we're going to lose, because you and your team cannot be everywhere all the time with your customers. And you can just have a few of those in-person interviews every week, maybe even every month, not even. So how should we think about balancing that, where AI availability especially on the research side, is one of the inevitable potential futures? What will happen?
I think there's a few things. I have my opinions on AI. I think in terms and in the context of research, I think it can be really helpful to chew through lots of data, lots of unstructured data. I think that it's very much helpful. My opinion on AI is that, kind of getting back to what is lost when we only do remote research. AI can't smell. AI can't hear the rain in the context of these things. And so there are ways of knowing that AI can't know. It can't sense, it can't perceive. And those are still very much available to us as humans. And I think many folks would have this opinion or have said AI is a tool. And I think that is true. And I think you have to be clear on what AI can do very well and what it's not going to do very well. And I think you're right. If we completely index on that, then we're chewing over content we already have and things we already know. And I think the way forward for true innovation is to stay open to the other ways of knowing and other ways of sensing, and also just maybe bringing some of our other ways of sensing up the hierarchy, and not letting it only be textual or audio or visual.
Could you give an example of an insight that you uncovered that would have been completely ignored had we relied only on data analysis of the data we collected through digital channels, even if it's unstructured data or AI research, whatever you have used? But what would be an example of in-person ethnographic research or just an interview with a customer that revealed something fundamental of an insight that you couldn't find anywhere else?
Well, I'll tell you two stories. Back when I did workplace observation, I'll have to think a little bit more on a digital one. The one I'm thinking of is we would watch, observe folks working in their offices, in their mostly cubicles, but a lot of open plan as well. And in one case, I saw this person had stacks of cardboard boxes beside him. And I walked down, the pathway, the corridor, and he had all these boxes stacked up. And I was making notes, and I observed, it was an assumption busting moment, because I thought, oh, this person doesn't have enough storage. Look, he's got boxes everywhere. But when I actually stopped and asked him about it, he said, no, there's nothing in those boxes. I have them there to create a boundary between me and the pathway. So he needed some visual privacy, so people weren't always looking at him, and it helped buffer the sound. And so then you're solving for a totally different thing. You're solving for privacy, not storage in that case. And so that's one where I think you can be led completely in the wrong trajectory in that case. I think another one that I would say was interesting is, this was many years ago, but we were creating a new digital flow. I think it was to sign up for a product. I can't really remember which one. And as the person was going through the flow, you could see kind of facial expression, and I was able to ask, like, what was that look on your face about? And he said, actually, that was too easy. I don't want to sign up for something that easy. What if I don't need it, or like that? I don't actually trust it because it's too easy. And I don't know if that's something that we would have probed if you weren't kind of in person watching and perceiving that micro expression. I'm sure AI can do micro expressions too, but where we're currently at, that's the kind of information I'm interested in.
Right. It's a classic example, right? Sometimes it's good to introduce friction, like when you're browsing airline tickets from like an aggregating website, like they make you wait on purpose a little bit to load the pricing. Today it's near real time, but it used to be like long time, and it was like part of it because it was compiling the data, but the other part was then it felt more real. We would just not give you all the prices, right? So adding friction is not a bad thing sometimes.
I totally agree.
For the last bit, I want to talk about another topic. It used to be a hot topic, but now we have AI, and it's like a little bit to the background, which is design for sustainability in customer experience. But it's still very important. And there are still, especially like in the enterprise realm, one of the strategic priorities for many firms. So how does it intersect with customer experience in your belief?
Yeah. This one's tricky to get our hands around, because I think there's many parts of the chain that digital needs to understand, but kind of the first thing, this misnomer or this myth, you know, I don't think anyone believes this anymore, but that, digital isn't, or it's more green or somehow less resource intense than paper or being in person at a branch, for example, or something like that. And I think, that's been dispelled. So there's this whole kind of question of where's the energy come from? How are we using it? And it's, how it comes down into that device you're using. I think there are lots of questions around that. And I think enterprises can ask questions about where their energy is coming from, how it's generated. There's that. There's another part which has to do with more the real estate or the server situation when I think of digital. And again, that's from my stake, like more the realm of engineering, and it's not really in the purview. And so the challenge I've had is, well, what really in our day-to-day jobs as designers can we do to help improve really carbon impact is kind of the line I've drawn around this. I think truly sustainability has social impacts, right? It has governance impacts. It has ways we relate to each other, and that's all true. But I've been on this path to understand kind of the environmental impact, the ecology impact on the devices. And so what I've been trying to focus on is what I'm calling the use phase of, like, when you have your device and you're using it, can we design that in such a way that it reduces carbon? And so I think there are some kind of obvious ways, but I don't know if they're widespread yet. Things like,
What will be an obvious way? Like, just
yeah,
indulge me, please.
Well, yeah, I think it can be things like, are we, how are we illustrating? Are we using line drawings all the way to video, right? Video is much heavier, takes a lot more energy to transmit, to store. Line drawings are a lot lighter. And some would say, well, you're cramping my creative style on this. I think there can be somewhere in that.
But so you mean, like, as a bank, having like one of the apps on the phone of the people that you serve, when they're interacting with you and you communicate something, then a line drawing is by definition better because it's just less energy consuming to create, and it can still help them in whatever they're trying to accomplish. Is that how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an extreme example, and I probably wouldn't make it through brand with that argument, but it's one of the things to consider, right? I think it's something, and when our team is like creating carousels and creating, images or animation, do we really need an animation? And I think that's where you have to now start trading off, like, customer delight for sustainability. I think there's those questions.
Yeah, or AI and sustainability, right? I mean,
AI is
every
another one.
image generation is melting the planet if we're like bringing it back down to the compute and the water that's necessary to cool down the data centers that are powering all of this. So
yeah,
sure.
Right? It takes one Google search is like boiling my kettle. These kinds of things that are like, do I really need to find out whatever pop star is doing right now? Like, do I need to ask AI to find it for me? We've been talking about, like, how do we not overcompute? I think there's, a place for all these things, but let's not use a jet to get to the corner store to get our milk, right? When we can simply walk. Like, we don't need to overdo these things. And I think just understanding some of those impacts up front help with the design decisions. So I think that's where our team is looking and trying to make impact and to understand. And again, it comes down to metrics and proxies, like Is energy the right proxy for this? Energy consumption use, and I think we have to have a lot more conversations with our engineering partners on this, because a lot of it depends on how they code and how they build things too. And so I think it becomes, another intersection there.
What is helping to build awareness for this, to build momentum for this? What is working well? I mean, just shouting it off roofs, people will not listen. But in the context of a commercial, skilled enterprise organization, what is some of the things that you see are actually driving the conversation forward, where people are willing to participate?
The biggest gap is not motivation. It is not desire. It is knowledge and skills on what to do. And that's how we're approaching it. We're starting with this idea of awareness. Did you know that Google search is the same as leaving your light bulb on for 3 days or whatever? I have to double check that one, but I know.
Is it that bad? Oh gosh, I feel
it's maybe
terrible.
Not that much, but these kinds of things. Should we have copywriters, like, we're designing this experience. Can we encourage someone to bookmark our site so that they're not running a Google search every time they want to come to our site? Like, that's a very small thing, but it's so, I think there's this question of what behaviors do we want to drive, and what tech do we need, and what design. And I think there's just, you can't act if you have no knowledge, I don't think. And so we've been working on understanding, like, what are those tools and skills we need to understand that? Can we create page budgets, for example, like this page won't exceed X, carbon outputs.
And then it goes on black, and then you get a 404.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. So I think, there's those, I think it's not easy. I think it's overwhelming. I mean, you've also maybe heard the quote attributed, I think it's attributed to Einstein. I don't know if it's his though, and I'm going to paraphrase because I can't remember it, but this idea of, like, the thinking that got us into this problem isn't the thinking that's going to get us out of this problem. And so how do we change mindsets? How do we help people think more systemically? How do we engage Indigenous knowledge? It's an important part of our experience here in Canada. The Indigenous peoples should have a lot of leadership in this area. And their relationship and perspective is, I think, very valuable. And yes, I think it's a challenge, but I think it starts with, what can I actually do? I think in my work that can change. I mean, frankly, we're at scale here, right? We have millions and millions of digital users who are customers of our bank. It gets exponential very quickly. Some of these what are perceived as small choices. When we think of not only just those customers, but how many times they engage with our products. And so what might seem like a small choice actually can make profound change.
Nice. What a wonderful way to wrap up this conversation. If people want to know more about you, or in Canada, or care about sustainability or the Indigenous people, like, where could they find you? What's the best place to reach out to you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Jennifer Jenkins. I won't pretend to speak for Indigenous people, though. I'll just be clear about that.
Sure.
But yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's really where I exist in the digital realm these days. So,
Jennifer, thank you so much for being with me here today. You were fantastic.
Thank you very much.
All right, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found it valuable today, don't forget to subscribe to the Experience Edge on your favorite podcast channel, leave a review, and share it with your team. I'd be delighted. Today's episode was brought to you by Daydo, an AI journey management solution for enterprise. To have an edge on your business strategy and to know why your customers do what they do, visit daydo.com and explore more resources to accelerate your customer experience game. And remember, the journey to creating customer-centric impact never ends, and here's always a new edge to discover in doing things differently. Next week, new episode. Until then, keep pushing the edge, stay inspired. See you in the next episode.